Hello and good evening, and welcome to episode 5 of the EVs and Beyond live kind of evening podcasty, recordingy, whatever we want to call it these days. All those things. It's the show with the terrible news sting. But look, it's a bit of fun, and I'm really proud of the community that seems to be building around the show. I'm not expecting huge numbers tonight. There's no really much BYD coverage, which just seems to be dragging people in. And also, I didn't do a huge amount of promotion. I've been really busy working on something pretty cool, as usual. But yeah, look, this thing's just going to grow. And we'll have some really big interviews coming up through this channel. Now, don't forget, housekeeping. You can comment as much as you want in the comments. And Brian Flanagan, evening. And David, evening to you as well. You can watch this on Facebook or YouTube. I suggest watching on YouTube. I think you get better quality and a better overall experience. But Facebook is where the community is, so we don't mind if you stick there as well. Yeah, ask lots of questions. Now, tonight, we're going to talk a little bit later about road trips. So I want you guys to throw your best road trip stories, best road trip questions, best road trip tips in regards to electric vehicles in those comments so that we can read them out at the end. Hi, Lee. I hope you liked my answer in the comments last week about free charging, Lee. I think you were asking about that. One of my little pet issues. Are you on the desert road tonight, Mark, or are you somewhere actually with a roof over your head? Now, let's introduce our guests. One of them is very familiar to you all. He has been on the show before. Well known in the EV community. Welcome, Gavin Shoebridge, also known as Kiwi EV Adventures. Welcome, Gav. How are you doing?
Much worse. Hello.
Are you having a good day? They're keeping you working hard over there at Ecotricity, pumping out those videos?
Yes, another video was released today. Working on the next one now. It's all go.
What was the one out today?
That was the Peugeot E208, so I'm only about 2 years behind everyone else.
It's an interesting little car, that one. It's really fun to drive. But I think it's a particular type of buyer that would like that one. Someone who really, really, really wants a small French hatchback, basically.
Yeah, I think it's the typical buyer would be someone in the city, I think, someone who's getting to the age where if they fall in the shower, it's going to be bad.
Though, the issue, I guess, is whether that cars like that is there's just so much competition in that space. There's so many of that kind of 50 to 60,000. I think they bumped the price. I think it's about 62,000 now. Or has it gone up or down again? Or
no, after the rebates, 55,300 and something.
Yeah, so it's 63 grand before 63. The rebate.
Yeah.
So the question is, would you go with that or a BYD Atto 3?
Oh, I don't know, because I still haven't driven the Atto 3. Was supposed to pick one up on Friday, finally, because I am, miles behind every other car reviewer. However, I got an email today from BYD saying someone's crashed it.
Oh, wow.
So that's not a big crash, it's just some broken things. So they've got to fix that. So that's going to be pushed back another week.
I'm going to have to send a text to our friend Warren at BYD to find out about that. That sounds like great BYD goss.
It's only some broken plastic bits. Apparently, it's all going to be fixed up. So it's not going to be a long delay. It just means it gets pushed back a week. So I said that these things happen. So be it.
Someone in the comments there was going, is there going to be a cheap one at the damaged vehicle auctions?
Yeah. Harvest the organs out of that one.
Right, now our second guest for today is someone not really from the EV world, but he is very experienced in the automotive industry. Graham McDonald is the former president of VIA, which is the organisation that represents all the various used car importers around the country. He's also been a long-time dealer himself. He's owned a lot of very petrol-heavy cars. But he's been a long-time close buddy of mine, and I've been trying to convert him a little bit, and we've done a few EV road trips over the last year. I'm bringing into the room Graham McDonald. Thanks for joining us, Graham.
Evening, everyone. Well, I'm not quite the EV devotee just yet, but I'm sort of just edging my way gently over the edge every now and then. So I call myself a healthy skeptic, but I'm being pushed in the right direction by Mr. Edwards here.
Now tell us about your T-shirt and tell us about what's behind you, because I'm sure you're deliberately wearing that and you're deliberately sitting in front of that pile of boxes.
Oh, what's a bit of branding, right? So I'm actually a Hot Wheels collector of some note within New Zealand. I've got about 14,000 odd Hot Wheels, and what you see behind is part of the collection. Now, there's a point to this because I received just a couple of days ago a very special Hot Wheels that cost me about $110, but it's the latest Tesla Roadster. And if you can see that, I don't know, but there's the Tesla Roadster has now been immortalized in Hot Wheels form. And I just picked it up in from the States, direct from the States. And so, funny enough, a little segue story, which we'll start this out. So the Hot Wheels and Matchbox community through Mattel is obviously dominated by petrol-heavy vehicles, small boys and girls push around cars that make noise. They don't push around things that go, hmm. However, Hot Wheels have come to the party, and there are more and more EV-centric castings turning up on the Hot Wheels line. In fact, this year, they've started a specific line called the Hot Wheels Green Team. And so they are showcasing, obviously, a lot of stuff from Tesla. But, for example, the new Lucid Air made an appearance a couple of months ago. That's the first casting of that. There's a Rivian just turned up. And we're going to see, I think, more and more of this coming through. Such an influential brand like Hot Wheels. It's the biggest, most profitable toy in the world. And it has a lot of influence for small boys and girls aged sort of 3, 4 upwards. And I think you'll see this sort of stuff becomes mainstream. And it also encourages probably people to accept these as a mainstream car, where there is their mums and dads sitting in the background and going, son, it hasn't got an engine. I think we're starting to see a real turning point in the toy community as well. There we go. My fun fact to start the night off.
I've certainly had a couple of Tesla Hot Wheels and that around the place, and they usually stay nice for about a day before my daughter gets hold of them and tears them open. But any electric Hot Wheels in your collection, Gav?
No, only the car itself, which is about the same size as a Hot Wheels car, the Allegro.
Now, if again, in the comments, if you can't tell us about your road trips out there, then tell us about what electric Hot Wheels you've got, or any electric vehicle toys you may have had. I've seen a few things like Cybertruck remote control cars floating around at the moment, and various things. But yeah, don't forget to mention that stuff in the comments. We'll put it up now, just so people can relax. We have a diagnosis for the damaged BYD from Warren at BYD. Just a dent in the hatch. Needs a respray.
Oh, that's not very dramatic. Could you lie, Warren?
Every dealer says that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now I'll be very generous here. And if that car's going to take a wee while, Warren, you can let me know. I can actually spare the one that I have for a few days next week. If that helps out the situation, just let me know, okay? Let me know. Right.
All right.
Anyway. Warren's going thumbs up.
All right.
So let's get on with the news. And we know you've all been waiting for it. Here's the terrible sting. The finest Canva could produce.
That's it?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Anyway.
You need to add the Wilhelm scream in there.
So, let us start with the news of the week. And actually, there hasn't been a lot, and I think that's because we had a public holiday and a few other things. And also, kind of the big news last week, we tacked in at the last minute into the last stream. Things like the pricing for the Volkswagens. I'm still amazed they squeezed an ID4 under $80,000. I think if you want one, I think you've got about 3 weeks to order it before they go back above the 80,000. Yeah, that's a pretty cool pricing on that vehicle. But this week's news, and I am not going to have an issue bringing up the slideshow this time. I got it. I worked out what I was doing wrong. Boom! It works. Okay. So, for electric vans for Mercedes electric vans for New Zealand. Mercedes-Benz Van has opened the order books for the eVito panel van, eVito Tourer, eSprinter, and EQV 7-seater. They are priced from, and hold on to something tight, $101,487, $127,030, $130,900, and $166,350 respectively. That's at the manufacturing RRP, including GST, but not on-road costs. I don't know why we're quite so specific with the notes there. With all 4 models available in limited quantities. Now, these are interesting vehicles, I think, in that they're kind of in two separate areas. You've got the e-Sprinter, which has a relatively small battery. I don't think it's got a range that barely cracks 100, that van. And it's very much aimed at the last mile. The Vito, on the other hand, actually has slightly bigger battery options, particularly with the EQV, which has about an 18, I don't remember in front of me, 8090 kilowatt battery. And I'm actually getting that vehicle to test. I'm sure, Gavin, you'll be sitting there taking notes and firing an email off to Mercedes as we speak. That e-Vito in about 2 weeks' time. Not the e-Vito, the EQV. I'm really looking forward to that. 8 seats, leather, luxury, with a electric drivetrain. And we get so many people always asking, I need to take more than just 4 people with me. What can I buy? There it is. If you've got $166,000. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I mean, I guess what's your other option in that space at the moment? You could get a 7-seat Tesla Model Y. Not that you could actually get one delivered, because I think they're pretty much not delivering the updated one to New Zealand at this point. But I think you're looking at probably $250,000. So maybe that EQV is not terrible value. Not for you, Mr. Single Man, Gav.
No, I could load up all my inflatable girlfriends in there, except Susie, she's got a puncture. But yeah, there's no real middle ground, is there? You've either got that, or you've got the LDV vans, but they don't have seats. Well, they keep talking about bringing models with seats. We're supposed to have ones before the end of the year with seats.
But I think they have one with seats now, but it says in a commercial, the big E11 commercial bus. I think they've got some of those either being done now or already now.
What are they going for?
I believe you can E-Deliver 9 with seats is still under $100,000. But that's a big, as I said, that's a big like 11, 12-seater commercial bus.
Right.
There's nothing in that kind of passenger space except you could get a Nissan ENV200 in the kind of 7-seat passenger thing, but you max out at 40 kilowatt hour battery there, and
yeah. So yes, you've got that or that in the LDV. There's nothing middle ground either. You've got used Japanese import vans or $160,000 vans.
I was going to say, am I missing something here, guys? $166,000.
Yeah.
What have I missed?
Well, this is for the
anything.
That's for the S class of vans, Graham. We're talking leather armchairs throughout and all the various luxury bits. And...
A luxury van, though, it's kind of like it's an oxymoron, like friendly fire or soft porn.
Luxury vans are big business. And Graham, I mean, you think of what people pay here for a freshly landed 2022 Alphard through the parallel import market.
Well, you can't buy them. That's probably a good point, actually. But you'd probably rather, I suspect you'd still save yourself multiples of many tens of $1,000s for a freshly landed Alphard or a Velfire, as opposed to $166,000 for the Mercedes-Benz. Mm-hmm. Call me the skeptic here.
I suspect that van is going to be very, very popular with the hotel set. I think there'll be some luxury hotels around Auckland that'll be quietly going and ordering one of those to replace their existing Vito. They can fit their various, climate change requirements, and it's a nice impression to give their premium guests when they're being picked up from the airport. And those are places that are used to spending big money on, premium vehicles for their pickups. I think that will actually have a market, and I do think there will be private buyers who are currently shelling out, $150,000 for a BMW X5 to haul the family around in, that will go and slap down money on one of those. The other options, look, I think the e-Vito is going to be a bit more of a struggle of a sell. I believe NZ Post has put their name on some of them. But I think a few of those will move, but I think it's going to be corporates that buy them. I can't imagine your average tradie in the street's going to go and pick up a e-Vito for $130,000. No, it was 101. No, that's the Tourer. So you can. Oh, hang on. So you can get the e-Vito Tourer, which is the less glamorous version with the 8 seats for $127,000.
That's getting better.
And
then
that's getting better
money already.
Yeah. Yep. But the panel van's $101,000. But then I guess that's $15,000 more than what you were paying for the for the Transit plug-in hybrid. It's full electric. I think it's going to be interesting to see. This is a space which is going to get a lot busier soon. We've got options coming from Peugeot and potentially Citroen, being a spin-off. We might see similar things come through from Vauxhall, basically the same vans. Ford have just really properly revealed in the last week their new generation Transit Custom, which is coming next year with an electric option. I think that's going to be pretty cool. The full-size Transit electric is landing here very soon as well. Vans are going to be interesting, and I think corporates will pay for them. I think not many them are going to choosers tradies out of their utes, but I think the corporates will definitely start ticking up some of these big ticket options just to get them on the road. I still think a lot of the LDV E-Deliver 9, which we'll talk about later. That is a good van. It's got plenty of options, and they've got sizes which aren't quite as good as that, but get down there. The issue being is that there's some complaints. I know we've been dealing with researching a story about one of the fleet operators complained that doesn't have a safety rating, but then no van of that size really normally has a safety rating, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, look, and let's think back to the good old Mitsubishi L300 back in those days. It didn't have a safety rating either, and they still sold like hotcakes. So, take your pick as to what things are most important to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's Now, in the comments, Jonathan Goodall has said, "I'm waiting for the Nissan ENV 350. Is there an ENV 350?" And I'm quickly googling that. No. Short answer: no. Yeah. Brian, that's the wrong one. Brian Flanagan says, "What about the electric Combi?" Yes, that's coming next year as well. And seeing what they did with the ID fuel prices, I'm wondering if Volkswagen might get relatively sharp on that vehicle. It is significantly smaller than any of the stuff we're talking about here. The ID Buzz is not a big vehicle, though there will be eventually an 8-seater coming. I think the first round is a short wheelbase 5-seater, but they aren't huge.
Any word on what the ID Buzz prices will be in New Zealand?
Well, I would have guessed before, but I think Volkswagen keeps kind of surprising me a little bit in regards to what they're able to do with those pricing. So who knows?
Do you think it's unlikely? Do you think it's likely to be under the clean car rebate threshold?
Oh, not a chance. Not a chance. Yeah, I mean, I would suggest you'll see the cargo version for maybe in the high 90s. The blinged out passion versions, I think you're going to get. I don't think they'll be as expensive as that EQV, but they'll certainly be up there. Interesting one there. But electric vans, they are coming, and again, we'll talk about them later. Now, on to our next story, and Warren will be happily watching this. BYD hitting its straps. Extraordinary demand has seen BYD Atto 3 deliveries reach 500 units in 3 months. Maybe Warren can give us a rolling live update. BYD New Zealand has hit a major milestone, confirming 500 customer registrations, with many more pre-sales to fill this month as shipments continue to arrive. One of the fastest selling EV brands here and overseas, BYD had a record August globally with 174,915 new energy vehicles, which I guess includes PHEVs and so forth, including 18,625 sales of the Atto 3, up 282% on August 2021. On top of this, BYD has confirmed to have struck a deal with Europcar NZ, with the rental firm announcing exclusive rights to the electric BYD Atto 3 as the only airport rental car provider in New Zealand to offer the vehicle. The rental car thing's interesting because rental cars is such a great way for people to try a vehicle and also to get some of the all-important used market. Hey, maybe you could go and rent one, Gav.
I would possibly like to do that. I already did that with Go Rentals. Took one of their cars from Wellington to Auckland. That was interesting. Interesting journey.
I'm more meant to.
Well, you're bang on. I mean, that corporate rental market for the day out of the airport or a couple of days or so is right pluckings for an EV. You're not talking about tourists that are jaunting out of the airport heading off around the East Cape. Perfect, absolutely perfect. And Europcar, I'd argue, probably do have a lot of that business market cornered anyway. So it's an ideal match.
we were waiting times.
we're Europcar corporate customers, and I was actually about to switch from Europcar to Avis because they'd stopped offering EVs. They used to have some Konas or some Ioniqs floating around, but they just seem to disappear. I guess we know why now, and great to see this on the market. I think one of the big things with the rental cars, and we see it a lot on the Facebook groups and so forth, is once you've driven an electric vehicle for a while, you kind of don't necessarily want to step back. And going on holiday and having to drive something that you don't really like driving is not necessarily, I always kind of would go on holiday and upgrade my car, not go in a different direction. Yeah.
Is there anything more soul destroying than the final fill up before you have to hand it back?
Yeah. That is, I've rented a few EVs now, and that is the best thing, is you can just drive it straight back and you don't have to put gas in it. Is that not appealing, Graham?
Well, I was going to say, Mr. Edwards, I might recall you and I returning a certain Chevrolet Camaro 6.2 litre SS2 to the airport of Los Angeles a few years ago. I think we were reasonably happy with that. Just saying.
That was the land of cheap gas, though, right?
My young and foolish days.
Gas at this stage, but we didn't care.
When in Rome. Yeah, it was running on a lot of ethanol.
We don't mention that. Sorry.
Yes. Look, and in the notes, the question is there a reason for the BYD's popularity beyond it being the latest new thing? And I think there is definitely more to it. I mean, this is just a great all-round car, and it seems to be filling so many people's needs. It's got that little bit more space than the MG, that little bit more range. It's a bit cheaper than the Kona, and so on and so forth. It just meets so many needs, and people are driving it and liking it. Yeah,
I look forward to one at the top supercharger. Not supercharger, hyper rapid charger.
Sorry, Gav, after rebate, what's your drive away in an Atto 3 at the moment? So approximate drive away after rebate. Fill me in.
About 50 grand for the extended range.
So there's the key to it. I mean, for $50,000 outlay for a brand new vehicle, I'd argue if it wasn't a EV, if it was either a PHEV or a regular petrol vehicle, I'd still say the 50 grand isn't too bad these days. Add in the fact that it's an EV, and you can see why it's selling like fast bananas. It's actually really good value. It's probably the first EV that I've seen that meets all the different markers that I'd say make it a great vehicle for the market to latch onto. And with no offense to your MG, Richard, but it's a slightly smaller vehicle. This is the everyday family SUV that I think the market's been waiting for a while. And new entrant to the market, be damned, people are picking up on it.
Yeah. I think the fact that BYD's got such a reputation overseas is pretty important as well. I think that's not a reputation, but it's been around a long time. It's not like it's, suddenly some new brand pops up from the jungles of somewhere. It's got a little bit more of a history behind that. Gav, you were saying you managed to sit in one. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I was charging a BMW. It was yesterday. God, what a long day that was. And I sat there at the top, or hyper rapid charger. God, get it together. And finally got the chance to sit in one, touch the dashboard. The owner that was there was enthusiastically showing me all the features and things. And at first impression I got was that it's all right. Seems all right to me. Looks, fairly solidly built. I'm, got my curiosity piqued anyway. And I like the textured dashboard that was supposed to be sinew or muscle or something, but it came across like the underbelly of a blue whale. And of course, the guitar strings on the door. That's just I like weird stuff like that. The display that turns 90 degrees. Weird stuff like that really tickles my odd gland. That's cool.
Tickles your odd gland.
As a motor vehicle trader, the very things you're just mentioning are the things that I look at and say, well, okay, 4 years down the track, is it all going to break? Is all that cool stuff going to be the stuff that actually breaks, or is hard to get, or hard to replace, or hard to fix? So that's the stuff I'm looking at. As a motor vehicle trader, we sort of look a bit further downstream. We say, well, okay, is all the nice to have stuff, the cool little things, is that going to be the Achilles heel of the car?
Possibly. And that's, it's a hard one. Like things like the spinning screen, it's great. Will that survive? I don't know. I think one of the interesting things about the Chinese cars popping up has been, and this I think maybe helped the trade when we get further down the track, is how easy it is to get stuff out of China for them. And I'm not suggesting anyone goes and buys their new parts from their BYD through AliExpress, but you sure as heck can buy some interesting accessories and parts too. And
Never
maybe
thought of that. That's a perfectly logical point.
and maybe in 10 years' time, when this thing is out of warranty and then it's starting to have a bit of some issues, then maybe you might shift to a different model where you start ordering your parts, overnight parts from China. Used to be overnight parts from Japan, now overnight parts from China. Interestingly, Graham is familiar with my old van Fritz, a German.
Yes.
a German van built in Korea that was then eventually built in China, and parts are very hard to get in New Zealand for it. But what I discovered, and not actually did much of it, I mostly imported them from Australia, though she was getting them from China, I suspect, was you could jump on AliExpress and buy pretty much any part you wanted for it with relatively short delivery times. So who knows? But Attico's a great distributor, and they're going to be around for a very long time, and I don't think parts are going to be an issue if it's being done by Attico, to be honest. I'd be more worried about some of the independent stuff, but Attico I'm pretty happy with. So that's it. Now let's have a quick run through some of the comments, because we're a bit behind on them. Lee says, lol, Susie's puncture.
She'll be fine.
Kian Khan says, hey Gavin, the BYD Atto 3, which was in next, it was meant to be mine. No longer going to take delivery of it now unless we can get another one before the end of the year. Oh, sorry to hear that.
Ooh,
Stephen Baxter says, put my deposit down for hashtag Team Red today. Yes, because the red vehicles are available for order now. Well, I think they were available, but they're getting closer. You had a Kona book with Europe car. It's been changed to a BYD. $103 a day. That's not bad. When you don't have to pay for gas, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Lee said, my wife asked this evening why we didn't entertain the MG. The MG is not a bad car, and it's pretty darn good value. And I actually think if you're a little more nervous about going into an EV or going into new technology, it's actually not a bad choice. It's a far simpler vehicle. Warren says, that's why it's got a 6-year warranty. Brian says, photos of the Atto's interior turned me right off, but I decided to go for a test on the one anyway. Once I sat in it, the interior looked okay, and now it looks great. CJ King, Hot Wheels broke. Hot Wheels break. I'm not sure. Maybe you need to explain that one, CJ. And Brian says,
I am broke Hot Wheels, but yes.
The guitar strings are very practical. Drink bottles are held snug so the bottle doesn't buzz or rattle. The only problem with those strings...
Can you play any music on them, you know?
Well, yeah, they got a bit of a tone to them. The issue with the strings is when you're trying to get your daughter into daycare at like 10 past 9 in the morning, you need to get to work, and she insists on standing there out next to her car seat playing with the strings before going inside. Yes, well, anyway.
I'll bet the designers didn't think of that.
Yes. Now, Brian, joking. Yeah, we'll go back to this thing up here. Remove Brian from there, and go on to so now Uber. Uber is to phase out internal combustion cars by 2030. Hashtag not in New Zealand. The CEO of leading rideshare company Uber has confirmed that the firm plans to bar its drivers from operating on the app with internal combustion engine vehicles by 2030 in the US. The ICE ban will cover the United States, China, and Europe, with Uber drivers in New Zealand and Australia expected to be given a longer reprieve. Now, we actually discussed this on another live stream we do, Graham, so I don't remember where we are on this one.
Well, you know my thinking.
Interesting. Now, the bit we missed, though, when we were discussing that one, that thing around, is that people may have remembered a while ago that Hertz placed a giant, massive order for Tesla Model 3s. And what was actually came out with this Uber announcement was that Hertz is doing a special deal in leasing those Model 3s to Uber drivers. So that is how they're getting, their plan is to get more vehicles on the road. It's really about changing the ownership model. And that's something that I think has been discussed before in New Zealand when we've seen hybrids come in and Ubers start up and so forth. So yeah, it's an interesting one to see this come along. I would be happy to ride in a electric Uber. Gav, could be a next career for you.
Oh, God. No, well, the problem is I would do Uber. It's just I hate people. So I can't.
There are benefits, I believe, in New Zealand for... There are benefits, I believe, in New Zealand for Uber drivers who do run electric vehicles, aside from not having to pay for gas. And that is, I believe, Uber in New Zealand halves their commission, I think. So the driver gets more. So I guess that's the poor hybrid and petrol drivers subsidising the nasty electric vehicle drivers, as I'm sure an Uber driver I'll speak to next week will tell me. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, obviously, getting electric vehicles into these roles where they're doing lots of mileage. If we go back to the vans, vehicles are doing lots of mileage, spending a lot of time in inner city cities. Is whether you believe in anything else, it is good for air quality, at the very least. And
have you ever gone jogging or riding a bike or whatever past a line of cars waiting in traffic? It's awful. It's bloody awful. And someone was born with a respiratory system. Yeah, more electric cars, the better. Just they stink, man. Something we don't talk about. We talk about carbon and pollution, but not the smell.
Here's a question for the panel and a question for people who are watching. So throw this one in the comments. Don't forget to put your road trip stuff in there as well. Would you pay more for an electric Uber? Because there have been electric taxi options in New Zealand, electric transport options before in New Zealand. Some of them were premium, charge a little more. We're seeing with the new Switch cars in Auckland, they're charging a little more. I think they charge like corporate car rates. Are you willing to pay more for an electric taxi? So yeah, throw that one down, and we will move on to our last news item. And this one comes with a video. God, I hope I don't get content strike.
Easy mode. It appears clear downrange. Copy. Training. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Airport. Almost.
Right, so the electric sea glider flies.
Oh, the aquaplane is back.
Yes,
Didn't look like it
yes.
flew very far in that clip, just saying.
No. So US aerospace manufacturer Regent has successfully flown its prototype sea glider, a zero-emissions transport comprising a mix of aircraft, ferry and hydrofoil, reportedly able to carry up to 100 passengers at high speed above the water between cities and towns, particularly harbour or shore-based cities such as Whangarei and Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch. The first flight demonstrates the viability of fully electric wing in ground effect craft and is a key step in the development of sea gliders, says Ocean Flyer, which is a New Zealand operation which is ordered something. Adding the aircraft, adding that it backs its decision to go with Regent after vetting multiple aviation options. Ocean Flyer Chief Executive Shah Aslam says bold solutions like sea gliders are needed for New Zealand to be carbon neutral by 2050. I believe there will be electric aviation. I don't think this is it.
I said right about now, that's about the last thing Air New Zealand need on the run to New York, I would say. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry to say we run out of electricity somewhere between Rarotonga and Hawaii.
Look, I think what we're seeing at the moment. I think what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of these companies popping up, taking a lot of investment, including the companies that order them in New Zealand, with a very slim chance of actually seeing things get off the ground. I mean, if for nothing else, that I can't imagine you'd really be able to handle something like that in New Zealand waters. I mean, I'm not sure I'd want to fly out of certain cities in New Zealand and weather on one of those. Sure, they might skim above the water, but there can be some pretty hefty waves off East Coast on a good day.
I was going to say, this is quite strictly, Lake Taupo on a calm day for a couple of quick flights over the city and then back again. Bodies of water like that we don't see very often around here, do we?
Yeah.
I do love the idea. I wish it would work. It looks cool, but whether or not I'd use it, I don't know.
So just a thought. Why not put wheels onto it and have it running off an airstrip? What's the big deal about it coming out of about it being aquatic based?
Well, this is the thing,
and the ground effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think guess the efficiency, the ground effect, and so on and so forth. I think the electric aviation we're going to see here sooner, other than we've got the Pipistrel down in Christchurch, which is a pretty cool aircraft. Is we've seen the Sounds Air team have signed up to work with Heart Aviation, which is a Swedish company which has developed electric power units for regional aircraft, and I've watched a bit of video with that through ABB and had a look at some of their stuff, and that actually looks like a real proposition. Heart Aerospace they have their own concept aircraft, which they have orders for. I suspect where we're going to see that come is Heart Aerospace partnering with one of the existing companies, like the guys who build the ATRs or someone like that, to put their solution onto those other aircraft. And their power solution is really quite adaptable in that the battery, the motor, everything is all in one nacelle, and it charges off a CCS2 charger. And that'll be great, I think, for the short hop ones, like Sounds Air, great airline for it. They have lots of flights, but their flights aren't really that far as the crow flies. They can get up, cruise down pretty well, and I think that's where we're going to see it start. I'm sure the technology will go a lot further in the future. I'm not sure we're going to see Russian plans coming back and cruising around the coast of New Zealand anytime soon. And I noticed that Heart's motors and their systems are full size and being tested. That was a very small radio control model, and I don't think that boat that was following it was particularly close. I think there was a bit of perspective going on there that perhaps was being missed. But hey, look, cool that people are trying. We've got to try all these things. Now, speaking of trying, Gavin, you and I have a bit of a similar habit. We seem to like trying to get cars that shouldn't go very long distances to go very long distances. I'm not necessarily talking about the Allegro. I'm talking about electric vehicle road trips.
Yes.
Doing them. And I have to say I love, and I'm slightly addicted to, electric vehicle road trips. They're a slightly different way of getting around. They are more challenging. They do take a little bit longer than a normal vehicle road trip, but there's some fun to it, some maths to it. And even to the point where I've almost got, Mr. McDonald down below, I've taken him on a couple now, and I almost feel like I've dragged you into this as well, haven't I?
I'm only at first kicking and screaming, but I have to say, Richard, I'm not averse to the odd road trip now in an electric vehicle. You may have pulled me over cross into the dark side.
Let's just have a quick look at some of Graham and I's adventures. And these are all available mostly available as videos on the EVs and Beyond YouTube channel. Little plug there. Go head over there once you're done here. This is a really cool one we did. We went and grabbed a Renault Zoe that someone in the live stream tonight who was working at Renault at the time had driven down to Invercargill. And we drove it back. We gave ourselves the challenge of trying to use as little of State Highway 1 as possible, which meant going through the west coast and then up and through the top of the South Island, then avoiding State Highway 1 up the North Island. And that included at the time dealing with the biggest EV gap in the country, or EV charger gap, about 260 kilometres through Haast and the lower west coast. Here we are down at Bluff in the little Renault Zoe. Here we are at the Hokitika Sandwich Company, so we completed the gap. It wasn't even particularly touch and go. Here we are in Greymouth.
That's a Greymouth.
Yep. On the ferry. Yeah, right.
Sneaky Tui.
Back to Bombay. That was a pretty fun trip, Graham. Two big guys and a lot of luggage in a very small car. I think the South Island was fun. I think the North Island and time pressures made that one a bit of a slog.
That was a grind that day. That was an absolute grind. Probably the only highlight was driving through a thunderstorm out of Rotorua, if you recall.
Yes.
And so we were driving an electric vehicle in a very electrified atmosphere across over the Marmacoos at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night in the pouring rain. That was quite an experience. And as if you recall, we could barely see, let alone drive. But, I'll give the little Zoe of top marks. It made it, and we made it to the Bombays with some range left to spare. So we did pretty well. We did pretty well.
Yeah, I think
You
even
know,
that.
we encountered some challenges along the way too. Let's be honest. We encountered a number of challenges along the way, and I've never stopped for so much coffee and pies along the way than my entire life in a road trip. Oh, it's time for a coffee. What that is, Richard's code word is it's time for a coffee. What that actually means is we've got to sit there somewhere in charge.
Yeah, well, that poor little Zoe only does charge in the low 40s, I think, if you were lucky. And yeah, that was before there were a huge number of. Well, there's still not many hyperchargers around. Bring on the hyperchargers, I say. They definitely make a difference to road trips. If you've got a car that can reach between hyperchargers, it makes a massive difference. So yeah, that was certainly a fun one. The car was a bit stinky at the end, and a bit damp, and
that was because of Richard's sweaty bum through calculating his way across the Haas Pass, although right down now, but he was convinced we weren't going to make it. And I swear you could see the steam coming off him as he was frantically calculating whether we could actually make it to the top of the hill or not. So nothing to do with the fact
that wasn't the actual scary. If you can recall, it wasn't the scary bit. It was up over the rise as we were going between Murchison and Blenheim. I think that was the
Saint Arnaud Pass.
So
and
that was
tough.
We were well underwater, so to speak, on range. We did not have enough to get there, but then by the time we got there, we had enough. We had more than enough because it's just elevation. It's a bastard when it comes to electric vehicles, isn't it? It's so mean.
I found that out.
Yeah. Oh, really? Tell us more.
Well, I got my hands somehow on the BMW iX M60, and that I took on a bit of a long distance trek. And my goal was from here in Auckland to see if I could make it down to the chateau at the base of Mount Ruapehu. And I did that drive yesterday, and I got there all in one charge. And I had a little bit left over as well. And that's the video I'm going to start editing tomorrow. So it should be really interesting because that has a 112 kilowatt hour battery, just monstrous size. And yet only 2.5 tons, But for a vehicle of that size, that's not bad.
Considering because I recently took the BMW i4 M50 down there, and that weighs 2.4 tons, and that's a far smaller vehicle than what you were driving. Yeah, no, that's a cool vehicle. We took that to Rotorua, and not from Mangawhai, and didn't even need a charge, and then plugged it in on the Tesla chargers at the hotel and didn't have to pay for charging. Just Now, of course, our other recent road trip, which you can read about in I think probably the July issue of EVs and Beyond. I can put it up on Facebook later. We drove a E-Deliver 9 and New Zealand's first electric ute, the T60 EV, which is a left-hand drive Chinese prototype, from Auckland to Wellington. Now, this one was slightly more challenging because the T60 didn't DC charge, and also it didn't really properly work on AC. We were using a GBT adapter, and it was actually struggling to work out what it wanted from the chargers, or what it could take from the chargers. So we were plugging it into 22 kilowatt chargers, and it was taking 3.5 kilowatt, and yet somehow we plugged it into a 7 kilowatt charger on the last day after it taking low rates on every other charger around the country, and then suddenly it charged fantastically. A bit confusing, but we have to clarify this was a prototype vehicle, and Graham, we're not going to talk about what happened outside of Palmerston North because it's a prototype vehicle.
What goes on to it, Richard?
Yeah, exactly. But outside of that, I did the numbers in that vehicle, and this was where I made one of my mistakes on planning the trip. That could go with one person on board, admittedly, from Auckland to Turangi on a charge, which is pretty darn impressive, I think. I made the mistakes more than the ute did, I suspect. It'll definitely make it to Taupo, no matter how you drive it. Not how many, but with the stuff on board, within reason. And so it goes to the odd thing. You can charge at Bombay on the hypercharger, charge at Taupo on the hypercharger. It just speeds up your trip dramatically. So that's a really big thing. The BYD, that's another car that can just get charge at Bombay up to near full, get to the Taupo hypercharger, and then get most of the way to Wellington from there. And we've got hyperchargers going in at Bulls, hyperchargers going in somewhere on the Waikato. If you've got a car that can use the hypercharger that you can get between them, it makes such a difference to your road trips. So here the vehicles are at the Tongariro Lodge. They've got 2 AC chargers there. Very good value place to stay if you've got 2 electric cars with you. And here is the E-Deliver 9 while the Ute was still charging, checking out the source. Here's the Ute. We'd made it over the mountains to Mangaweka. So that was that one. But Graham, you rather enjoyed that trip, and you were driving the van predominantly, and it just chugged along.
Yeah, it did. I'm sort of a former white van man out of the UK. I spent a year or so living in London, driving vans and trucks for a living. So I was the quintessential transit van man in the morning, stopping off in my local for a sneaky baked beans and butty and a cup of tea. And that sort of brought back great memories of cruising around at high speed, although admittedly not quite as high speed as a transit van will do in London. But it was actually a damn good van, and I quite bonded with the little thing. Well, big thing actually. And
I believe that one is the bigger. Its model name is the E-Deliver 9 Bigger.
Bigger, that's right. And the only place where I thought, ooh, this is not so clever, was going up Transmission Gully, because we went up Transmission Gully on the very day it opened. It had opened at about, 7 or 8 in the morning, and I headed up over to the airport at about 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I remember a couple of particularly the really steep first hill, I was anxiously watching and thinking to myself, boy, this is all the life of my range is being sucked out of this thing. But to its credit, it made it, and I made it to Wellington, to the drop-off point with some range to spare, and I was really impressed by it. Okay, so here's the sort of the kicker though. The tradies, we were running an empty van. It was just me and a very light bag, as we tend to pack on these sort of things, and a couple of flagpole banners in the back. And what I'd still like to know, whether it's this or it's the T60s, when you load it up with a traditional tradies lot, so tools, concrete mixer, ladder, couple of guys in the back, the girl from accounts you picked up last night, put them all on the back of the ute or the front of the cab and see how it actually performs then. And I'm not saying it wouldn't, but I'd be curious to see how these commercial vans stack up in real world conditions for the average tradie or average company.
I guess the thing with that is that wasn't the big battery version. That was a 71 kilowatt, I think, battery version.
Yeah.
And it was, well, we weren't necessarily getting that because we were, moving along, and also we weren't doing to 100%. I think we safely would say that vehicle could still get 200 open road. And that's with massive windage. I think, with a load on, the Ranger might be restricted, but I think round town, I almost think like the weights, what you're going to lose in the weight's going to be not similar to what you'd lose with the windage on the open road.
I agree with that. After towing that caravan and the Polestar 2, the difference between 80 kilometers an hour, 85 and 90 kilometers an hour is a good 25% increase in power consumption, and that 10 k's an hour difference. The wind makes such a difference.
Yeah. I actually think that E-Deliver 2 is nicer on the open road than the diesel ones, just because of the lack of noise. Just haven't got that diesel rumble and that vibration. But you drive a Ranger, which are perfectly smooth, so maybe you didn't notice it.
What noise? I can't hear you.
So in New Zealand, road trips in EVs are actually relatively easy. We've got so much charging now from ChargeNet. It's growing every day, more hyperchargers, so on and so forth. Unless you own a Leaf. I'm sorry if you own a Leaf, none of this really counts to you. In which case, you're a far stronger person than I to road trip on a Leaf. Adam Middlebob, I'm talking about you. But spare a thought for our Australian cousins. Now, this was a couple of years ago, admittedly, just before COVID. And I know they've got a lot more charging now. But I did an EV road trip in Australia. My wife and I grabbed a Tesla Model S out of Tesla Australia in Melbourne. And we did the Great Ocean Road. Now, the challenge with that is that there is no DC charging, well, there was no DC charging anywhere along the entire loop from Melbourne out to the Great Ocean Road and along the Great Ocean Road. Not a bean. There was one supercharger in Geelong, and that was it. So we had to bob along on Tesla destination chargers, and even then, they weren't particularly well looked after or maintained. So, for example, we were able to charge at a brewery of all places. In fact, both of our charging stops, two of the three of our charging stops were alcohol related. This one was at a vineyard.
After all.
This was at a vineyard that was converting to a brewery, and they had to move their a bus that was a bar, and then get a broom out to scrape the spiders off this one. There were spiders that would kill you living on the Tesla charger. So that was an interesting one. And then, the next charging stop was behind a bottle store owned by the same brewery that would charge you quite a bit of money per hour to park and use their charger. But yeah, that's so spare a thought for the Australians. Even in Melbourne, I was over there recently driving a Mercedes-Benz EQC, and we went out to the outer beach suburbs to go to some hot pools and have a burger, and I was a bit low on charge, and I thought there'll be something out there. There was not. Some of the rich outer suburbs of Melbourne. And it was a case of I had to crawl at about 50 kilometres an hour back through side streets to scrape my way to a charger a little bit closer to Melbourne. It was a fun one. Yeah. So that was that. Now, Gav, you must have some road trip stories. Other than the videos about the plug, I mean, when you had your iMev it wasn't your Ion, I think, in Europe, did you take it on in many road trips?
Oh yeah, it's going to sound boastful, but I'm the first person living in Slovakia to drive from the Austrian border across Slovakia into Ukraine and back again. And of all the cars, it was with the Peugeot Ion or Mitsubishi iMev and drag. And I stopped and rapid charged 16 times there and back. And so that's a lot of sitting around waiting. It didn't charge fast either. I think the peak you'd get is about 40, 43 kilowatts. So that was a long, long journey. And then again, just going down to Ruapehu in this BMW reminded me of, I took the same car in Slovakia skiing once, and we left at something like 5 a.m. Didn't get to the ski field until 2-3 in the afternoon, and had to stop a lot, and we had to double back at one point because we started driving and realized
you're popular.
Not going to make it. So, but that was it's lunatic fringe I was on at the point. Now driving cars like this BMW with its 112 kilowatt hour battery pack, I'm like, I much prefer this. There's just no more range anxiety. I can get used to this. So my days of road trips on cars that can only do city distances, I just don't have the heart anymore. I've tasted the forbidden fruit.
Money fixes many things.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of money, Richard, you might recall, I think it was our 2015 road trip in the States, and we were in, of all places, in Elko, Nevada, and we'd stopped at, as you do at a Denny's, to refuel for a very late breakfast at Denny's. Elko is on the I-70 corridor in the middle of absolutely nowhere, the Great Nevada Basin Desert. And there was a family turned up, and they had a whole bank of Tesla chargers outside. Of all the places to have it, was outside of Denny's. And a family, clearly, obviously either from San Francisco or somewhere very nice on the West Coast, had just turned up, and their Tesla was a Model S to charge. And if you recall, the kids got out of the car looking like, pretty much at that point in time, Dad had just murdered them, like properly murdered them. He had brought them from the nice enclave of San Francisco, maybe Berkeley perhaps, and they were now in pretty much hell, or hell version 2, which was Denny's in Elko. Remember them sort of troopering through, looking as if they were going to get, Ebola off the counter services any minute now. How dare Dad stop because there was a charger in the middle of Elko, Nevada. How things have changed.
Nothing wrong with the Denny's.
There's not.
Lumberjack slam all day, man. Lumberjack slam all day.
Got it.
Got to love a meat lover skillet. Now let's plug a couple of your road trip videos that you posted recently, Gavin. The first one being you've just taken a rental Tesla from Wellington to Auckland.
I did. Yeah, that was an adventure. That's the longest electric car go in one day I'd ever driven, and it was from Wellington to Auckland in a Tesla. I'd never done that journey before. Like you've done it, everyone else has done it, but as I said before, I'm about 3 years behind everyone else. Of course, I knew it was possible. I just didn't know how easy it was, and it turns out it was a real piece of cake. I mean, there was no waiting at all. Not 1 minute of waiting. I charged in Mangaweka. While I was eating breakfast, having a muffin, cup of coffee, going to the bathroom, I was there for about 20 minutes. And by the time I came out, the car was full. I realized I could have eaten faster, but I don't like rushing food. So I wasn't waiting at all. I needed to use the bathroom anyway because the coffee I had earlier in the morning was looking for an exit. And then I stopped in Taupo for, I think, about 5 minutes to do a little spiel to camera and use the toilets there. And that's it. I came back in and I thought, I'm just unplugging and going now. And that's it. I was none of the waiting, none of the, like I used to do in my little Peugeot, sitting around waiting for 30 minutes. Well, okay, what do I do now? Let's read the news again on my phone. None of that. I just stopped for the normal time. I would stop being a human, going to the toilet, eating something, saying something to camera,
And that's on the Ecotricity YouTube channel?
Yes, it is, yep.
So go watch that and then go jump over to the EVs and Beyond YouTube channel. I did the trip in reverse in an Audi e-tron. So from 6th out of Auckland, that was a bit of fun. I think slightly more charging required, though that e-tron was pretty impressive in that video on the on the hyperchargers at Taupo. And then once they've done that, so jump from the Ecotricity channel to the EVs and Beyond channel, then jump over to Gavin's personal channel, which is Kiwi EV Adventures, and check out his road trip. And something, Graham, you're going to be a little more akin to the Allegro.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, what a beauty.
Now, I'd just like to note that is in what they call the Pantry, which is a little specialty sub-dealer of awesome classics as part of Butler Motor Company down in Christchurch. Super cool guys down there at Butler Motor Company. Really lovely. They just absolutely adore cars. And even
Allegros.
Look, even if you're an EV diehard, I think everyone can appreciate some vintage metal. That place is worth checking out.
The smell when you walk in there, that old car smell is fantastic. It's like sitting on Granddad's lap.
So I'm guessing your road trip in the Allegro wasn't as easy as your road trip in the Model 3.
No, actually, it wasn't. Well, it was pretty painless. I mean, okay, granted, the heater didn't really work, didn't blow hot air anyway. There was some vague warmth coming from somewhere under the footwell, but I couldn't pinpoint it. And it was noisy and slow and a bit smelly, but otherwise it was fairly painless. The car worked. No comment. The car worked remarkably well. Not well enough for me to have any concern about ripping the engine out of it. No way. It's only going to be an upgrade. But the car worked well enough that I think I could probably get $1,000 for selling that motor afterwards, I think, hopefully. But no, I'm looking forward to converting that thing to electric. I got my first parts. First parts arrived. I've got a inertia switch. If I have an accident, that'll cut the power. And today, my vacuum switch. It'll help the vacuum-assisted brakes work. That arrived today. But yeah, the road trip was fun.
Are these overnight parts from China, like we spoke about before?
Oh, absolutely, of course, yes. Yeah. It's from the People's Republic of China because I care about the people. I'm all about the people. So.
Right. They said that first one too. Look at how that worked out for them.
Yeah, I think the Allegro is pretty much a communist car, isn't it? Anyway.
Yeah, it's British communism, really, isn't it? I mean, it was thrown together on a Friday afternoon from people who took time off from standing around a brazier. Yeah.
Hey, quick question.
Strike, lad.
Yep.
Where speaking of communist cars, where is the Lada these days? Do you still own it, or is it you've sold it?
No. Well, I had to when I left the USA. I had to sell everything. I had to leave at a very short notice, unfortunately. And I sold the car. I only lost $2,000 on it. I had to sell it fast. I sold it back to the Soviet Car Museum in Seattle. They sent a guy down with a trailer. And he took it all the way back, and it's now back in the museum collection. And me putting 10,000 Ks on it, driving across the USA, I had great ambition for the car, but no, it's now back as a museum piece. So,
wow.
Oh well, I guess it was just my turn, but I did have plans for that, but marriage.
I wonder if the Soviet car museums had to shut their doors temporarily, considering the political situation in relation to the Soviet company.
Yeah. Actually, I've got in the cupboard my personalized plates. I bought personalized plates. Somehow they weren't taken in the state of Florida, and I got them just a month or so before I had to get on the plane and leave. The license plate, Soviet, and personalized plates. It's like, it was perfect, but no, that's life. So at least I've got more.
And see how far it gets you.
Well, yeah, maybe it's for the best it didn't work out driving a Russian car around the USA now. So
now we're going to start running through some comments as we start to wrap this up. So if you got any last comments about your road trips or anything, any questions for any of us here, then please do jump in. Though we seem to have covered most of it already. Now, this is in regards to Ubers. Lee says, no, as a consumer, I want price parity with EVs on all fronts. So Lee not willing to spend more for an electric ride to the airport. David, no, should have to pay more for gas Uber. Right. Now, Brian, talking about road trips, it was a pretty short road trip, but during the weekend, Mrs. F and I packed up Otis, the large dog, into the Atto and drove from Whakatane to Te Kaha. He says the Atto handled it well, very comfortable, smooth and effortless. I didn't throw it around the plentiful corners, but it was very pleasant to handle. He said anybody looking for a road trip should do the East Cape. In my opinion, the best roadie in New Zealand. It is definitely something I'm thinking about. Graham, maybe we should go camping in an EQV in a couple of weeks' time. Just saying.
Spring your deodorant, Richard. Two smelly guys in an EV around the East Cape. What could possibly go wrong?
Anyone need an alcoholic? I'll come.
We've got plenty of those.
All right.
Mark Buckingham says, I spent a total of 44 minutes stopped between Auckland and Welly last week with the Model Y. I spend more time than that looking for a toilet on an Auckland to Wellington trip. Would easily spend that on breakfast, dinner, lunch, or whatever.
Yeah.
Danny says, pick one, Model 3 or Model Y.
Ooh, I know which one I would choose, and it wouldn't be popular.
I'd go the
Model
Y.
3. Yeah. Simply because I like sedans. I've always liked sedans. It's purely aesthetic. There's no logical reason, because the Model Y is better on paper, but I just like the looks of the sedan.
I have a kid. It's got to be a Model Y. I got too much stuff.
Right, okay.
The pram barely fits in the boot of a Model 3. That's why. It's one of the reasons we really like the MGX. Had a big boot. The BYD similarly has a decent sized boot on it. Not quite in Model Y stakes. That boot is massive.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. How they have a boot that big in a car that size, I do not know. Absolutely crazy. And Mark Buckingham says, I found towing 200 kg or 1,500 kgs is about the same economy. It's more aero, that's the issue. Mark Buckingham, had both Y wins. And Mark Buckingham does a heck of a lot of mileage.
He does.
For those who don't know, Mark is the tow bar king, and he drives around the country basically installing tow bars on Teslas. Brian, Model Y looks like Lime, the Hunchback of Austria. Anyway, it looks like the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I was taken aback the first time I saw one.
But Model Y or Model 3, Graham? Or neither?
I was going to say, could I cash it in and get the Mustang I want? Okay, got to have an opinion, right? I actually prefer the looks of the Model 3. I'm just not really that sort of big dumpy hatchback kind of guy. It just doesn't really suit me. So the Model 3 it would have to be.
Yeah. Jeff says, I managed to drive a 40 kilowatt Leaf from Reefton to Culverden, arrived with 29% having left Reefton with 94% state of charge, drove 70 kilometres to Lewis Pass, then 80 kilometres to Culverden, taming range anxiety. Yes, Brian says, okay, like the...
Fill in the gaps there.
Yeah.
We need more words, Brian.
Yeah.
Whose line is it anyway?
So I've got a question for you two then, okay? So I did a 950 kilometre round trip, road trip on Sunday. left Auckland at 12:30 and got back to Auckland at 10:30 and did 950 Ks in the course of that day. What would you recommend would do the trip? Ooh. If I had to do a journey like that again, and I do journeys like that on an occasional basis, the reasons why are material, but let's just say that I want to go and do it again. But this time, I need to choose an EV. What would you suggest I have to look at?
Well, if you have unlimited funds,
you can do that.
Yes. I'm not going to go choose an
M60 I took, for example. That could do it.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to charge. You'd have to do a big.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
So minimal charging. Maybe limit it to. I'm going to give you a charging point in Owakuni. Okay, so I've made it to Owakuni, and then I want to make it from Owakuni to Auckland at a reasonably rapid rate of knots across not just state highways but secondary roads as well. What's going to do it?
Well, no, on that trip you'd probably no matter what the car, you would probably top up and taup on the way down and top up and taup on the way back. Just because there's a hypercharger there. Theoretically, yeah, you could charge at Owakuni. There's a DC charger there, but it's a bit slower. It's not that bad. Yeah, I think you go with the iX, you go with the i4, the Tesla Model 3 long range would do that. I'm not sure I think you can order one of them at the moment, but it might be a bit of a wait. Model S would do that. The e-trons are a bit heavy, don't necessarily have the range for that at the moment. That trip, you'd actually do pretty darn well in a Kona. A Kona would do that trip without too much hassle. That easily does well over 400 kilometers. So you're really talking one big charge or two smaller charges. Probably not a lot cheaper cars than a Kona. Ioniq 5 or Kia EV6 with the 72 kilowatt battery, they'd do it really easily, and they're not out of this world expensive cars. Yeah, they're not the kind of things necessarily you drive yet. I don't know, but yeah. Well, look, no one's saying they're perfect. As we said at the start, we think that EVs are a bit of an adventure, I think, for doing a lot. Well, not an adventure, but, a little bit of a challenge. A little bit of math
for now. For
doing a road trip for
that's
now.
Changed. I mean, look at the last 10 years, how far things have come in 10 years. It's
it wasn't a trick question for you either. No. It was actually a genuine question. And Richard, I can see an opportunity for a future road trip to an extent on this. Talk to me. Watch the space.
Well, here's a question: is how much was your gas bill for that trip?
I don't know. I just put diesel into it.
Well, how many
tanks comes from the sky from the diesel trip?
No. Okay, all right. So this is the mathematics for you. So it was a Volkswagen. God help me. It was a Volkswagen Tiguan 2-liter diesel thing that I traded, and
pretty miserly cars. Yep.
Yeah, not too bad. And I caned the absolute snot out of it. I topped off the tank in Auckland, and I put about another $70 into it in Hamilton, not because we needed to, because I just wanted to have a bit of a fail-safe buffer. So it did 950 Ks. What's the tank capacity in those things? I think I filled it up. It was 130, I think it was, to fill, 120 to fill, I think it was, from empty in Auckland. Plus road user charges, but don't forget there's a bit of a switch there because the EVs are currently not paying road user. The diesel is still paying a portion of that. But the kicker here was, apart from a coffee in Taupo, and I'm talking a 5-minute coffee in Taupo at 2 a.m, drove all the way through to Owakuni, had breakfast in Owakuni, and then back on the road. And once we left Owakuni at 10:30, we did not stop. Well, we had stops, but there were no points, no ability to charge. So the question would be, could we do the journey that I did in an EV, with the important thing being Owakuni to Auckland without charging and at a fast rate of knots, like no time to think about economy, go.
The answer is maybe, but unlikely, I suspect. I think you'd be pushing it, but then I think that's an extreme example, and all you'd have to do it would be literally a 10-minute stop in Taupo, maybe 15 minutes.
So we have a challenge one day, Richard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I guess if I go through if I try, what my point was with the comment around fuel, is that you used $190 worth of fuel. And we'll keep road charge user charge out of it because eventually EVs will have to pay road user charges, and we'll say $190 worth of fuel.
About 150. We didn't need to fill up. Well, my point was, I had a quarter tank left in Hamilton, so I didn't need to put any more diesel into it, but that was just a fail-safe in case.
Okay,
so let's just say we use the tank, $130 worth.
Yeah. So if I look at by the time it had that same mileage in the Atto 3 on my recent road trip, my total fuel bill by about that point of the trip was about $35 by the 950k mark.
Yep.
So I guess that shows the difference in there. But yeah, no, look, I'll say you're probably going to struggle to get that far out of them, but I think you'll get there eventually. Or will you? I mean, that's the thing. I don't know whether they will push range on EVs that much further. I think more now the focus is going to be about getting faster charging and bringing down the price of the vehicles rather than outright range. I think outright range is going to be a bit of a thing left for some of the outliers. You look at Tesla. Tesla have really long range EVs. Their best selling one is their shortest range EV. That's it's horses for courses, I guess. Now we'll finish up the last few comments. Flanagan says hunchback, etc. He said Brian says an Aptera might do the distance.
Ooh.
It would, but yeah.
At what cost?
I don't think the Aptera. The Aptera is never going to be, no matter what people think, a fully fledged production car. It will be out there as a niche, low volume vehicle for enthusiasts. I don't think it'll be a production car, but that's like a full factory production car. But that's my opinion. Gav, you think it'll make it?
I agree.
Yeah. It's very cool. And I love the idea.
I'd like to drive one, but
I think it's less vaporware than some of the other cars out there. You know, there's things like that solar-powered car that really was just a hacked-up BMW i3 they keep on raising funding for in Europe. All sorts of other stuff like that. I think the Aptera is very real, but not something I would imagine we'll see here doing road trips anytime soon. Awesome. Look, I think we'll call it there. For some reason, the viewers have risen up towards the end, even though we started really early. I guess people had to put the kids to bed or something like that. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't caught at the start, don't forget, if you're on YouTube, particularly, I think, Leaving Live, you can go all the way back to the start and find Graham's moments where he tried to trap us EV drivers. Look, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Gavin Shoebridge from Ecotricity and Kiwi EV Adventures. Go check out his YouTube channels, and Graham McDonald, who look, if someone still wants a hybrid, or maybe you might have the odd plug-in around the place, they can visit you at Croydon Wholesalers most of the week.
I'm not a complete heathen, Richard. I'm not a complete heathen.
Graham has done a lot for electrification in New Zealand from his VIA standpoint, but also he does sell a lot of hybrids, and I don't care what you think, hybrids are a decent stepping stone, and a lot of people who buy a hybrid might go and buy an electric vehicle next time. He sells an awful lot of those.
Yep.
He's a good man.
It's all about progression.
Exactly. So thank you, everyone, and we will catch you this time next week.